homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room. To the interview room, everybody, on this wonderful Sunday evening. We're so grateful that each and every one of you are here to support this channel, to support the families who are fighting for justice. And tonight we have a special show. We want to thank all of our subs, our Patreon members, and of course, our mods, Miss Sophia, Teresa M., and hopefully keep your prayers for Teresa and her family. They're going through some medical issues that they're struggling with. Also, Maui Girl, Mimi J2, Miss Sophia, and Laura. Thank you for being here. Tonight, Dr. Gary Brucato and I have a special guest, Mr. and Mrs. Kim and Todd Hansen, the parents of Rachel Hansen, whose case we are going to discuss at length this evening. We are so grateful to each and every one of you to help support them in our chat, and any ideas that may come to you, or if you have information about this particular case, please remember that this is an active case being worked by the Gilbert Police Department in Arizona, and her young life needs justice, and that means there has to be information. So just a quick overview. On June 4th, 2022, 19-year-old Rachel was engaged to be married, and she had just recently moved into an apartment in Gilbert, Arizona. On the second day in her new apartment, someone entered around after midnight and took her life by shooting her while she was in her bedroom. She was able to crawl out of her bed for a moment and call 911 and report that someone had come in and shot her. And her exact verbiage, according to the transcript, is, "I've been shot. Someone broke in and shot me." Since that time, her family has been on a crusade to find justice. And so we are so grateful to have them here to tell Rachel's story. So I want to introduce to you Kim and Todd Hansen. Welcome, both of you, to the interview room.
Thank you, Chris.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you here. But then, of course, my heart breaks for each and every one of each moment of your life, But so, Dr. Gary, thoughts before we get kicked off here tonight in Rachel's case?
No, I just want to say welcome, and I hope that something we say tonight will lend a little bit of a feeling of support and comfort, if anything else, and really help to put on a kind of mega blast, a case that I think gets gobbled up in some of these high-profile front page, newspaper kind of stories. But to you, there's nothing more important in the world. And I think it's a beautiful thing that we're able to give you an opportunity to do that, to kind of bring together a bunch of people that can often come up with very clever insights when they hear about things, and leads and put things all over the internet and really bring the case to the forefront. And Chris and I, as members of the Colcairns Foundation, are very sensitive to the needs of families of people who've been through this. And I think, just want to thank you and dedicate everything we say tonight to your daughter.
Amen.
Well,
Thank you.
well said. Right from
Amen.
the get-go. Well said. So
Amen.
let's get started. Let's talk. Tell us about Rachel.
Well, that's a very open-ended question. Rachel came to our family when she was 6 years old. She had a very traumatic early childhood. We did foster care, and so we were foster parents. And we were called about Rachel in January of 2009. She was available for adoption already because her birth mom was gone. There were no family members. And so she was already severed and available for adoption. And so when we got the call, we said, absolutely, no questions asked. So she came to our family February 14th, already severed. And so her adoption went very quickly, and she was adopted in May of 2009, May 14th. Yeah, exactly 3 months later. And she was just from the very beginning a little spitfire. She had survived many abandonments, first from her birth mother, then from a person that she lived with that she thought was her dad or grandfather, who she came home from kindergarten and found deceased on the floor of the apartment. Then she went into emergency receiving foster care and was in that home for about 6 months. And they said they were going to adopt her, and then they didn't. So she came to us. Gosh, go ahead.
It's okay. It's okay. Give her a second.
Well, you
Take your time.
So she came to live here, and there were many, many, many things that happened after that. Mom tells the story so much better than me, so I'm just here to keep that guided.
Yeah. All right. Whew.
She was a horse-loving girl.
She would sit on the back fence of the pasture and ask for a horse, because at that time we had rehomed the horses that we had from raising children earlier. And so knowing that would be the best thing for a young girl, we got her a horse. And that started.
Woke up one morning and she was out there on the fence, had saddled the horse like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, had saddled the horse, which I don't know if you know how heavy a saddle is. They're heavy.
Yeah, she had a baby saddle.
She couldn't have been more than about 80 pounds, 75, 80 pounds.
Less than that. She was
60 or so pounds. Little bitty thing. The saddle weighed probably almost as much or more than her. And she had saddled the horse and was climbing on, and we walked out and like.
Well, I think she, up until then, she had carried things a lot heavier than a saddle.
Yes, she had.
Yes.
So that was her beginning to the horse world. And she just lived her life on the back of a horse. If not the one we had in the backyard, she would be on neighbors' horses. She rode with neighbors. And we went through several different ones. As she got older and more experienced, we would find another horse that met her level of ability. So she had 3 or 4 that she was really, really bonded with and attached to. And she just did gymkhanas and little rodeos and did all kinds of things. And that was really, I think, her saving grace emotionally. That really helped her. And so she grew up doing that. She was a brilliant student. She was so smart, just was one of those kinds of kiddos that learned everything she needed to in the classroom. So she never had homework because she got it all done. She had straight A's.
Because she wanted to come home and get on her horse.
Yeah. Yeah, she did. And so she was just always very involved in everything that she could be. This is a graduation picture.
Yeah.
She was so eager, even though she enjoyed high school and gosh, in junior high, she wanted to try everything. She played soccer. She ran track. As an 8th grader in junior high, she joined the football team because
She joined the football team?
she was the only girl on the football team.
She had to get special
Awesome.
permission to do that.
And she was faster than many of the larger boys. She just wanted to do and experience everything. And so then when she moved into high school, she again was just a brilliant student, made straight A's, ran track. One year she decided she wanted to try being a cheerleader. She did that for a short time and said she didn't like being around those kinds of girls. So that wasn't her thing. And then she was volunteering for the wrestling team, and somebody was absent. One of the boys was injured or something. And so the next thing we know, she's on the wrestling team in high school.
The boys wrestling team.
Yes. And she actually did really well. She won some different awards and all of that. So she just was a go-getter. She was involved in the youth group at our church. She did lots of fundraisers for the church, like collecting canned goods and putting boxes together at Christmas and that sort of thing. And in the rodeo world, she, there were a couple times when there was a young man that was hurt in a rodeo accident, and she helped raise money. She helped put on a barrel race to raise money for this young man. She just always jumped in with both feet, got involved, and did whatever she could to help. And you may know already, she enjoyed high school and enjoyed doing all of the things, but she also was so ready to start her life that she graduated a year early.
Oh, wow.
With honors, when she graduated, she was 16 and then turned 17 June 12th. And because she graduated early with such good grades, she actually had a full ride scholarship to NAU. So we did all the normal parent things. You know, we went up and visited the school. We paid for housing. We paid for the cafeteria program, everything that you do. And about a week before we were supposed to go up for Parents Weekend and meet everybody and all of that, she just broke down and said she couldn't go.
Can't go.
She
couldn't leave us, and she couldn't leave her horse.
So she didn't go to NAU after all. So she started her business called Arizona Hansen Horses, and started out mostly training and riding, exercising horses for people. And then it developed into helping people find a horse or sell a horse. And so she just was very active in her business. Yeah.
I think this comment right here, what a beautiful gift from God,
Yes.
is an amazing
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chief.
when you were talking about her. I got the chills, and I don't usually get the chills. Sincerely, I can really sense her spirit.
Yeah.
You know, just the way you're describing her.
Now that doesn't mean she wasn't the normal teenage kid that had her.
Yeah,
her
no,
issues.
we've raised 4 of them. Trust me, I get that
I mean,
one.
she was a go-getter, but
Yeah.
she had her challenges like
Yep.
everybody does.
Because she wanted to be so independent, yet close to us. Like, she graduated early. She started her business. She found a way to do everything that she wanted to do. And she was a go-getter. And so through her business, when she was working in the horse world with different people, she had several offers by ranches to work for them. So for a while, she worked for a ranch up in Cave Creek, and that's where she learned to drive a big truck. And because at 16, she wasn't ready to get her driver's license. She was a little bit afraid of that. So also during this time, she was rescuing horses. And so even before she could drive or haul a trailer, we would go out to Florence, where they round up horses from all over, from Nevada and Utah, wild horses, and they bring them down. They try to auction them off, and then the ones that aren't auctioned go to a kill pen. And she could go to that and look in the eyes of a horse and say, I want that one, and bring it home and train it, not fully saddle break, but halter break, and train to load in and out of horses or out of trailers. We have many pictures of her with different Mustangs that she rescued. She probably had 5 or 6. She actually rehomed one of them to a police officer up in Show Low.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. She got that horse ready to saddle break, and he came down and picked up that. It was a Mustang, a wild Mustang.
Now let me tell you, folks, that's not an easy task.
No. It's also not an easy task to have them living on our property.
That's not an easy task for grown men, big grown men. You're talking a 1,200-pound horse.
Yeah.
That's not an easy task to do for big grown men or women. And then by this time, Rachel's all of 100 pounds.
Yeah.
She
never was over 5 feet tall.
Yeah.
She was a little
huge
Spitfire.
huge thing
Yeah.
about her personality.
Her demeanor. She was not ever afraid. And I think the horses could sense that. So she spent a lot of time doing that in the last couple of years of her life, working at different ranches, rescuing horses. We were forever driving out, hooking up the horse trailer. We drove out to Buckeye and picked up a horse that was starving. People had moved out, left the horse there. We drove out there. She saw it. She jumped on it. And of course, as a mom, I'm just gasping, like, rode it around, loaded it in the trailer, brought it home, and nursed that horse back to health, and then rehomed it. That is what she spent her time doing.
Yeah.
And then after she'd worked at the couple ranches up in Cave Creek, further away, and had really seen a lot of horse life and business that was not what she wanted to do. More competitive, I guess, than she wanted to be a part of. That's when she first got her apartment close to us. It was only 3 miles down the road from our home. She got that in June of 21, got that apartment. And she lived there because it was close to home. Her mare was at our house, and so she could easily swing by, take care of her mare, ride, whatever. And then in the heat of the summer, she had a couple different jobs because she could only work with horses in the morning. And then in the heat of the day and in the evening, she worked at a couple different places, restaurants in downtown Gilbert. And then she also took a job at a place in Tempe and worked evenings there as a server. So she did that in addition to running her business. And then about in December of 21, she met another couple of ladies that had a ranch out in Santan Valley. And they asked her to come and work on the property. They had a casita. They said, we want you to live on the property so that you can work with the horses all day, every day. And so she agreed to do that and subleased her apartment to a person that she found on Facebook. And against our wishes and our parental guidance, questioning if that was even legal and if it was safe, she said, yes, of course, it's fine. Everything's fine. And, and being independent and strong-willed, that's what she did against our will. She found this person that took over the lease, and she moved out to the casita where she lived from January until the very end of May of 22. During that time when she was living out there, the two women that owned the facility did different things with horses. She helped them. They really didn't know much about horses, so she was teaching them. At one point in January, she and one of the women took a big dually and the 6-horse trailer and drove overnight up to a ranch in Montana and loaded up 4 yearlings, 1-year-old horses, and drove back the very next day through snow and ice.
The snow.
Yeah, as you would know, in Montana. Brought those yearlings back, and she drove a lot of the way. And she was just 19. She didn't get her license till she was 18. And I, as a mom, of course, thought, oh my gosh, Rachel, you're not only driving a big truck, but you're hauling a 6-horse trailer through the night in the snow and ice up to Montana and back. But
yeah, that's like 45, 50 feet of vehicle that she's hauling there.
Well,
yes.
The trailer was probably close to 40.
And that nothing ever intimidated her. She could do it. That's what she wanted to do. And she did it. And they got back. They had these yearlings. We have beautiful pictures of where she lived on the ranch, the casita. Literally, she would open her front door and here's this big arena with these yearlings living in it. And her horse was out there. So that's what she did during that time and helped these ladies. Then in the spring, when it started getting really hot again, she got her real estate license. She studied. She put herself through. It cost her, I don't know, I want to say around $800. She never asked for money. She paid for it herself, got everything, studied, put herself through, and passed the test and got her real estate license.
At 19 years old.
During that, she had met some different people in the field that wanted her to work for them. And her vision, her dream was to not work so hard training the horses. Because that was really hard. And she'd been bucked off and thrown and different things many times, and gotten back up and got on. But she wanted to work in the real estate business and help sell real estate properties where horses could live, horse properties, and then help the people with the horses there. So that's what she was working towards. And when her employment ended at the ranch in Queen Creek, the 2 women that she had been working for basically let her go, fired her, if you want to say that, the week before she was killed, for several different reasons that we disagree with, but that's what happened. For one, they expected her to have the yearling horses already broke, which if you know about them, you can't even saddle and get on them until they're 2 years old. But she was making progress, but that hadn't happened. And then in April, when she was loading a horse, it got spooked and backed out and kicked her in the hand and shattered her pointer finger. And so she had to have surgery to realign it and pins put in it. And that was the whole thing because she's terrified of doctors also. But so because of that, of course, the surgeon told her she couldn't be in the barn for 6 weeks. Well, she lasted about 2, and then she had to be out there working with the horses. And then when we went in to have a checkup, the doctor looked at her hand and said, "You've clearly been in the barn and you're not supposed to be doing that." Anyway, that kind of caused some conflict also with the employer. So these 2 gals let her go Friday before. So that was the very end of May, around May 30th, maybe. And they told her that if she had her belongings and her horse and her dogs off the property by May 31st, they would not charge her rent for June. So her dad and brothers and fiancé and everybody went out and helped get everything off of the property, onto a trailer, and her dogs, everything but the horse, and drove them back to our house. Unfortunately, I was in Indiana at the time babysitting 2 of our grandbabies, so I wasn't in town. But they did that, left that trailer with all her belongings in the driveway. Todd hooked up the horse trailer and headed back out. And as he was headed back out to the property, texted the women and said, "I'm headed back out with the horse trailer to load her mare. Per your request, we will have everything off the property by today." And he got a text back that said they had removed the horse from the property, and here was the number of their attorney.
Contact the attorney.
Contact the attorney. So basically, they took the horse illegally and held her for ransom. And that caused Rachel to just absolutely lose her mind, because that was the love of her life, besides Jomet. But since she had been 12 years old, this was her horse. And so she was frantic, not knowing what to do. She went through some significant issues in that next couple of days, just not knowing where she was going to go in life and what to do about solving that problem. So Todd was contacting the attorney. Anyway, as it turned out, we had a friend step up and offer to, well, before that, let me rewind. During that week, Rachel was trying to do everything she could to sell what she had, figure out how she was going to find Dash, get Dash back. And she'd asked the people to move out of the apartment because she needed to come back and live in the apartment. So forced them to move out. Also, I don't know the details, but she also said that they had not paid rent for a couple months. So she was very concerned because she was behind in rent for the apartment, told the people to get out, which they did. But I understand not very willingly. There was some conflict there. But they did move out. And so on Thursday, she came home, gathered a lot of cleaning supplies, went to the apartment and started trying to clean it out and make it ready where she could move in. Unfortunately, the people that had subleased it were doing drugs. We think also dealing drugs out of the apartment, because of the nearby residents saying there was always coming and going. And there had been many, many conflicts and police called to that apartment while the people were subleasing it. So that is what
and that apartment is not the same where her life was taken, or is it?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
It is the same.
That's
Okay.
the one that was subleased.
Yes.
And while they were subleasing it, we were there after she died and emptied the apartment out, and it reeked.
It was very, very bad. And so she was there Thursday trying to clean it while also trying to figure out what to do about her horse, calling me all day, every hour. What do I do? What do I do? And she was talking to her dad, and she was posting on Facebook about trying to find her horse. And he was telling her to calm down. I was telling her, Don't worry about the apartment. Stay in your room at home. I'll be home. I'll help you clean it. We'll get it sorted out. But I think she was just in a frantic state.
We were trying to get her to slow down.
Of trying to figure out primarily about her horse and where her life was going at this point. So anyway, she spent the first night was Thursday night she spent in the apartment. And that is the night she was actually asleep. The door was locked. She was by herself, and she opened her eyes to someone standing over her bed.
And what time in the morning was this?
I think it was around 2 or 3 a.m.
Okay.
And I'm sure she probably screamed, whatever she did, and the person took off, just left immediately, but left a jar of dill pickles on the counter, which we have no explanation for. But in that moment of panic, we wish she'd called the police, but she didn't. She called Gilbert, her fiancé, and said, I just woke up. There was somebody standing over my bed. It was probably somebody that had a key to the apartment from before. I don't know. He said, I'll be right there. So he came over at 3 or 4 in the morning, whatever it was, and was there with her. And as they talked about it, decided they needed to change the lock on the apartment door. But because it was so early in the morning, no place was open yet. So he went to his house and got a lock that had been used in their home, but was not being used. It was just in their garage at the time, and brought it back and changed the lock on the apartment door. And then Friday, she spent that day also trying to do what she could about her horse, starting to move other of her belongings that were in our garage to her apartment. She had a very dear friend who's an adult woman that has a great big truck come over and help her load her mattress and box springs to her bed. Went over to the apartment somehow, I don't know, with help maybe, because her apartment was on the 3rd floor of the apartment building. So I don't know how. They must have had help. Get her.
There's no elevator or anything?
No.
So they have to haul everything up those stairs.
Yes.
Stairs in a
3 flights of
Yeah.
stairs. Yes.
Okay.
But anyway, they got that up there. And this dear friend of hers, while she was helping her, kept asking her, Rachel, what's wrong? What's wrong? You're not yourself. What's going on? And Rachel kept telling her, no, it's okay. I'm fine. I'm fine. And she couldn't get any answers, her friend. And so she finally just gave her a hug and told Rachel, I know you're not okay. I know something's going on. I can tell by your face and your demeanor and your behavior, but I love you and I'm here for you. And if you need me, let me know. I'm here. So this friend could feel there was something that Rachel was either afraid of or there was something going on. But then that evening, Gilbert, her fiance.
Just real fast, if I may. Okay. I just have a thought. Forgive me for interrupting.
No.
Did she describe the individual that had been standing over her?
No.
Male, female, anything like that?
No.
I think it might have came out as a man, but I can't say that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. She just said somebody was looking at her in her bed while she was sleeping.
So by implication, she didn't know the person. This is not the one that was involved in the conflicts that have been described. It was a total stranger.
Correct.
Total stranger. Right.
Yeah. And the pickles, what happened to the jar of pickles?
That is such a strange thing.
That's a mystery.
We did not know anything about all of this until after Rachel had been killed. And Gilbert was sharing this because it was Friday night that she was killed. And he told us about that on, I guess, Saturday, about the person looking over her. And that's why they had changed the lock. And the person had left a jar of dill pickles on the counter. And all I know is that 3 or 4 days later, when we went into the apartment to collect her belongings, the jar of dill pickles was still sitting on the counter.
Really?
I'm not so sure at that point that we had known what it was. I think that might be when, it might have been even later than that.
It might have been when
told
it
us
came
about
out
that.
because we didn't.
It was odd. It was odd. They were, our family, when we went camping, we always had a bottle of Vlasic kosher dill spears at the end of our camping trip. Say, okay, it's time to go home. Everybody have a pickle. But these were Vlasic, full, like cucumber sized.
It's just
It was a big jar. It was
very random.
We did the little jars like that. This was a big jar of.
Right.
Yeah.
And
very odd. Very odd.
Forgive me if is it okay if I jump in with a?
Yeah, of course.
But because I'm not really a believer that these little trifles have no significance. They're often very important.
Agreed.
The fact that it's puzzling is very important. And
Agreed.
I will tell you, I did have some years ago a patient that used to eat whole jars of pickles like that because he was an opioid abuser. Opioids make you crave salt sometimes.
Interesting.
It's interesting to me that drugs may have been involved here. I used to buy them and carry the jar around to suck on them, eat them because of the saltiness. And it is a known reality of opioid abuse that you can develop that craving. That's very interesting, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah.
Because it's so random. The other thing, of course, is the question of whether it was some kind of message, but that's another story altogether. Just out of curiosity, and forgive me for this extremely sensitive question.
Right.
I assume that autopsy was done. There's no reason to believe that your daughter was pregnant.
Right. There was a full autopsy. No, she was not.
Good. Okay.
That's a reasonable assumption, but no.
Right. I was just wondering because it's often, when there's these seemingly motiveless things that go on, you have to think about some intimate dynamic that, could. Now, the other thing is, was there any actual sign? It sounded like the door was locked, but somebody was able to come in. In other words, they didn't break in a window or anything like that. And she used the phrase "broke in."
That was the night she was murdered.
We're getting ahead of it because there's two influences here. The night before,
this is the waking up to someone staring,
Yes.
right? And then, but we have in other words, I guess I'm making the logical leap that the person standing over her must be the same as the person who is responsible, but because it's difficult to believe that there'd be two different people that are coming in when somebody. Right. The other point I want to make very quickly, if it's okay, is that given how formidable your daughter was, how strong she was, I almost think it's not a coincidence that she was targeted while sleeping and that the person fled when she woke up. It makes me think that somebody knew her and knew what a ferocious fight she'd put up, and as a consequence, wanted to target her when she was asleep.
That makes sense.
They wake up and they flee, and then they have to come back another time. So that would suggest somebody familiar with her. What do you say, Chris?
Yeah, and we're getting ahead here.
Yeah.
I want to stay on pace with, because there's there's what they call the victim risk continuum.
Yeah.
And so I want to stay on that because there's a high probability it's obviously somebody that's come in through her network somewhere. I mean, there's somebody, but before we even get to that, I want to go back to the night of, we'll call this the pickle incident. Okay. If we'll go back to the pickle incident, is this the very first time she stayed in that apartment by herself?
Correct.
Yes.
That was Thursday night.
Okay. Do we know what her habit was in her other apartment in relationship to, would she lock her doors? Tell us about that.
She would always lock her doors. And we do think the door was locked that night.
Okay.
And she, as I was explaining earlier, she had lived in that apartment alone before she subleased it. So, yes, she was always careful about locking things. So I do think the door was locked that night, the pickle night.
Okay, so she's had that apartment for almost a year,
Yes.
and the sublease, that whole situation turned sideways with all the
Right.
cops coming there and all the other problems that were in that apartment. And then she basically took it back.
Right.
And so she moves in the first night, and that's the pickle night.
Right.
Okay. And do you have any sense in any way, any indication that those pickles could have belonged to her?
No.
Not likely.
Okay.
No. She
Were
didn't.
there any other items in the refrigerator or anything that you felt that she may have placed into that
No.
environment?
The pickle jar was totally out of character for
Okay.
her. Everything else was just normal, mustard, mayonnaise, and veggies and that.
Well,
type
really,
of thing.
there wasn't very much
There
at
wasn't
all
much.
because
There
she
wasn't much.
hadn't been living there. She had just moved in Thursday.
She took just a
Got it.
little bit over with her. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. That's probably accurate. That probably went on Friday when she went over. She probably took the things that went in the fridge.
Yeah,
Okay.
she-
And
Thursday,
so,
there probably wasn't anything.
so here's this jar of pickles post-incident when the police and everybody is gone and you folks went back there. Did you by chance take any photographs?
Unfortunately, not.
Okay. Not a
I
problem.
couldn't even breathe.
I was
I
taking.
know. I
I
know.
was holding her hand.
Also, the police, I did not know, but they don't clean up.
No, they don't.
So,
Yeah.
no.
And I'm so sorry that thought process even enters back into your mind. Please forgive me.
Yeah, no,
But,
it's okay. It just, I'm shocked. I just feel like there should be an advocacy group of some sort that takes care of things like that.
Yeah.
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 And one other thing I did want to point out, because Gary, you kind of mentioned this, and Chris, when you were describing when she was shot, her crawling out of bed, I just want to clarify that Rachel did not crawl out of bed. She, being the little fighter that she was, I just know, and from the description of everything, she was shot. She jumped out of bed, grabbed her cell phone, which would have been on the floor, the table next to her, whatever, and called 911 and said this, and then ran to the bathroom because that's where she was worked on, as evidenced by us when we got there, so to speak. Because that's her personality. She knew there was a problem and she was doing what she could to solve it. And so she had gone to the bathroom to get a towel or get whatever she could. So she, I'm sure, was, and she had quite a conversation, as maybe you've seen the transcript. I don't know. She had
I've read it.
quite a conversation for 5 or 6 or 7 minutes until the paramedics were there, and she really was not then able to speak anymore. But she fought as that whole time. I just wanted to clarify that.
No, this is, thank you for doing that. Very, very grateful, because I had said even on the first, program that I did about her was that she was laying in bed. And so I think I said she was even shot in the back, and I don't even know if that's accurate now.
No, that is not. And two other things. She was shot in the front, on her left front,
lower left abdomen,
and the bullet left her right upper shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And at
That
what
was basically-
trajectory was it going?
We don't know. Lower left.
One round?
Yes,
Yes.
one.
Okay.
That's per the hospital.
Mm-hmm. We have all the medical records, and we actually talked to the surgeon on the phone for an hour
Well,
because I needed to understand, and that this type of injury, I wish I could remember now, it has a specific name. It starts with a P, but it has a 95% fatality rate,
Right.
because the way that the bullet traveled and the
Right.
damage it did to so many organs on the way.
Was it top to bottom or bottom to top? If you
Bottom
don't mind
to
me
top.
asking.
Bottom
to top.
now
Okay.
remember now, one that is the case that we don't know the trajectory. We know that it went in the bottom left the upper right.
Okay. So the entrance wound was on the bottom left,
Mhm.
Correct.
and the medical report says entrance wound bottom
Now,
left.
We don't have the medical examiner's report.
Right.
We have
Okay.
the hospital's report from when they did surgery. Now, she was shot at 2 a.m. and pronounced dead at 5 a.m.
Right.
So there was 3 hours of surgery.
They worked on her.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. He told us because she was so young and fit and healthy and everything that they thought they might be able to save her. And he called a partner in, and they both worked for quite some time. And
Okay.
so,
Okay, so I want to shift gears for a second and kind of take your thoughts away from that piece of it just for a moment. I want to go to pickle night still. I want to stay at pickle night. Okay. When she woke up that morning, right after getting this scare, I mean, huge scare. I mean, somebody standing over you at 3 a.m. You know, that's scary. And then she calls her fiance, and he comes over. And that night, and keep me honest here, that night, obviously nothing's open, and the decision is made to change the lock the next morning. Would that be accurate?
yes.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. And the subleasee and everything that had the apartment before, obviously there were keys available for some folks, and I'm assuming that the police know all about that situation and will let them stay focused in that arena and not interrupted even in this conversation, because they may have information that we don't want out in the public in any way, shape, or form, because they may have some, definitive leads or something to that effect. But
If I may, let me interject just for a second on that.
please.
The key situation is a huge, huge, huge question mark. That's why I didn't want Rachel to go out on Thursday. Her mom was gone. I was busy taking care of the family and taking care of our home. I would have rathered she wait just a day or two. That's what I told her. Please just slow down and wait a day or two and let me go out, and I would have changed the door locks. Then when I found out after she had passed, when I found out that they had changed the door locks and done this and that and the other, I'm like, I was mad, because I would have put a fortress on that thing. Had I had any idea somebody was going to come and get her, I would have locked that thing down like Fort Knox.
Right.
Any of you who understand what that means. But that's a very, very questionable and obviously unanswered question.
Yeah. Okay. So, but that morning though, we have a new lock system from her fiance.
We have a new lower lock. It had two. It had a lower handle, keyed handle, and a deadbolt.
Okay.
The lower lock was changed. The deadbolt was not.
So that means we have new keys that morning.
They had no key. They just put a lock on it to lock it, but there was no key. So Joe Met, when he left, he couldn't lock it.
From the outside. It had
Okay.
to be locked from the inside.
So she would have to lock it from the inside. But did he go to the store and purchase a new lock kit?
No, this was just one he brought from home.
Okay. So he got a lock from home, some type of lock mechanism from home, no key, came back to the apartment. Do you know what time that was in the morning?
I don't.
Okay.
No, but before any stores were open.
Okay. So that morning he changes the lock system. All right. And there's no key to that lock, according to who?
Joe Met.
Okay. According to him, the fiance. Okay. And then throughout the day, have you had a conversation with her about the incident from the night before?
Not about that. We had both talked to her, but not about that. And I don't know why it didn't come out.
No,
Okay.
I don't think she even mentioned it she was.
How did you hear about the pickle incident?
After she died,
Yeah.
And may I ask where you learned, who told you that?
Jomet told us
Okay, so the fiance tells you.
Yeah.
that's why they had changed the door locks, was because of that incident.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I guess that's a good segue into tell us about their relationship in terms of, it sounds like they were engaged and, that was a loving scenario. Give us a little understanding into that.
Well, yes, they were, although they also were young and it was coming right out of COVID. So they were not planning a wedding actually until October of 2024, but they were engaged. They had a very loving relationship. And that Friday, I think Jomet worked during the day and Rachel was frantically trying to do what she could to research and find out, look for Dash, her horse. That evening, I know that he came over to the apartment. I talked to her that night. They had gone swimming. They'd had dinner. They'd had a really good evening together. And she told me she felt so much safer being closer to home and in the apartment. And she was really happy to be there and be away from the ranch and all of that. And she said they had a very good night together, she and Jomet. And that was 9:30 in Arizona. So it was 11:30 where I was in Indiana. And so the last time I talked to her was about 11:30. And I told her, good night, sweetheart. I have to go to bed. I have to get up with the kiddos in the morning. So I'm glad that you've had a good evening and you're feeling safe and happy in your apartment. And I'll see you when I get home in a couple days and I'll help you. And that was the last conversation I had with her. And then we found out later they watched a movie or whatever. And then around midnight, Jomet needed to go home. He had a landscaping company business that he worked with his dad. And they, in the heat in Arizona, they try to start at 4:30 or 5 in the morning. So he left to go home and be ready to get up and go to work with his dad. And our understanding is that, from what he told us, he knew the lock that they had put on. He couldn't lock from the outside because it didn't have a key. So he woke her up and said, Rachel, get up and lock the door. I'm leaving. And she said she would. She said she would. He left. He said he walked 2 or 3 feet away. He was leaving the apartment and he didn't hear her get up. So he went back in the apartment, back into the bedroom and woke her up again and said, get up and lock the door. I'm leaving right now. And again, she said she would, and he left. And I don't.
So when you were talking to Rachel at around, 11:30, even before that, right, Kim? When you were talking to her that night, she was telling you about their evening and they went to dinner.
Yes.
They're watching him. Was he there while you were talking to her?
That would be 9:30 Arizona time.
9:30.
Yes, I believe he was. Yes.
Okay. And did you get a chance to hear him in the background or talk to him?
No, I did not.
And did she mention that he was there?
Yes, she told me that he was there and they had a wonderful evening.
Wonderful.
And then she texted me and said, I feel this weight off my shoulders being back into my apartment. I just feel more safe and at home.
And what's the time on that text?
I think 8:30 Arizona time. Yeah, 8:30 in Arizona.
So, and you're in Indiana and you call her after that text or before?
No, before we were talking.
So that would have been a little bit different than 9:30.
Yeah, I guess it was.
So we want to back the time frame up. to about what time do you believe you spoke with her now, looking at that text to refresh your memory?
Maybe so more around dinner time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe around 6. It's hard to remember because during the day I talked to her several times.
Yeah.
3 or 4 times.
You're a good mom. That's what good moms do, constantly in contact. So
Yeah.
let's say, what time do you typically eat dinner?
Well, for me, where I was in Indiana or here.
That night, you think?
That night. It was probably, I don't know, 6 or 7.
Okay. So let's say 7:00 as at the latest point right now.
Okay.
Just kind of using that. Okay. So around 7, and then you speak with her maybe around 7, between 7 and 8:30, right?
Right.
Approximately.
Right.
Okay. And then she sends you a text. Was this after you guys had hung up, I'm assuming?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So at 8:30, she sends you a text saying things are just awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And then she must have called after that again because I specifically told her it's 11:30 in Indiana. So that would have been 9:30 her time.
Got it.
9:30 in Arizona. And that's when she said they had dinner and they'd gone swimming and they were going to watch a movie. And I said, that's great. I'm happy for you. And I'll be home in a couple days, but it's 9:30 or 11:30 here. And I've got to get some sleep.
Did she say where they had went dinner?
I think they ordered food into the apartment. I got the impression they stayed at the apartment.
Okay. And obviously, is there a pool at the apartment complex?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they ordered him food. You don't know how she typically would do that. Would it be, like these food grub and all that other stuff?
Yeah, I'm sure it was
good question.
Something like that.
Good question.
Uber Eats or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay. No problem. So around 9:30, though, you have another phone call with her.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's in this phone call where she tells you about the dinner, the movie, etc.
Yes.
Okay. And is he there at that time?
I assume so. Yes. She says he is.
Well, they were going to watch a movie.
Yeah. Yes. I did not talk to him. But...
Okay.
Right.
And so then at some point, do you have any other communication with her post 9:30 p.m.?
Mm-hmm.
So around 9:30 p.m. on, that would have been obviously June 3rd,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
That was the last communication you had.
That was the last either of us ever heard from.
Yeah.
All right. So then walk us through when you get, when you first become notified of the situation on the 4th with your daughter.
Okay, I'll take over on that.
Okay, Tom.
So
excuse me.
It was 7 a.m. and knock on the door, and I had all of our boys here.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I think you all know we got a big family, so I had our boys here. And 7 a.m. I got a knock on the door, and I went down in my sleep shorts and whatever else, and they said, "Are you? Do you know Rachel Hansen?" I said, "Yeah, of course, she's my daughter." And said, "We need to talk." I said, "Oh, great, what's she done?" Kind of in a lighthearted, because we had 7 teenagers in our home at one point in time. We're kind of aware that there are little issues that go on. And it was very much lighthearted, like, "Oh, great, what'd she do now?" type of thing. And I remember the detective's look on his face was like, this is not jovial. And he said, "Can we come in?" And I said, "Yes, sir. Let me go change clothes." And I did. And they explained to me what had happened. That was 7 a.m. And in the process, two of my boys, Ben and Josh, woke up and
Take your time.
sorry, folks. This is one of the hardest parts for me. Well, all of it. Anyway, they came down and said, Dad, what happened?" And they're both, young boys that I knew would probably get angry. They loved their sister. They really did. They loved Rachel, and they would have done anything to protect her. And I knew they'd probably have a little bit of anger to them. And I walked them out in the garage, and I sat down, and I told them everything I knew. And I said, "You guys vent, get angry, scream, yell, do whatever you want to do, and talk. But we're not leaving this garage with hate." And we sat there and talked for, I don't know, hour and a half, something like that. And of course, answers weren't made, hearts weren't settled, but it gave them an opportunity to just kind of blow off a little bit of anger over it. And then I had to figure out how to call my wife.
Yeah.
That I paced the floor for probably an hour trying to figure out how to call her. And I said, "Honey," I texted her and I said, "Can you go find a place alone?" Because I knew she was with our grandchildren. And I said, "Could you please go find a place alone so we can talk?" And she's like, "What's up? We've had all these kids. Like, what could go wrong now? I mean, yeah, go feed them peaches if they need it, or again, jovial, like, come on, honey, what do you need to talk to me about that's that important?" I said, "Please." And then she called me, and I told her on the phone, and that was hard. That was hard. And she immediately, our other non-adopted, but just as much of a daughter, Emily, found her a flight home, and our neighbors went to pick her up because I knew I could not drive. I could drive there, but I wouldn't have been able to drive back.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Joe Matt was close to the first call I wanted to make, and they asked me not to contact him, which I understand. Investigation, love gone bad. That's kind of the first place you go, and I understand that. And so I didn't, and that was the hardest thing. That was the hardest thing. I wanted to contact Joe Matt and say, "I love you, man." And because I knew damn well he couldn't have had anything to do with this. And so I didn't. And he literally, when he walked out of, he wasn't even in the parking lot at the police station, and he called me bawling and crying and asking if he could come over. And I said, "Absolutely." And he came here, and we cried together, and we talked about it. So that's how that day went. Then it was basically waiting on Kim to get here and me figuring out how to go about things till she did.
Yeah. But I got home that night, Saturday.
8 or 9 o'clock.
Yeah, there are no words. Nobody, unless they've been in that circle, there's nothing anyone can say.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's very difficult, and I'm so sorry. So that morning, you hear the story about the lock. Is that morning, or is it, when does that conversation come up?
No, we probably didn't talk about that till Sunday or Monday or whatever day, maybe when we went and emptied out the apartment.
Okay.
It was a day or two before we talked about the lock and everything, because I was flabbergasted. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I would have had that thing locked down like a fortress. I think that might have been when we went to move her stuff out of the apartment, and Jomette went with us. I believe that's when we walked through and he told us about these things.
Okay.
As I recall, I can't be sure of that.
That's fine. That's fine. What did she have a dog?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was it in the apartment?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Two.
In the bedroom with her.
2 dogs? What type of dogs are they?
Well, the one that she and Jomette had together was just a little Boston Terrier that was theirs. And then she fostered with me. And so at that time, it was Holly, I think.
Holly.
So kind of a husky shepherd mix, but very, very timid. They didn't bark.
She's not a barker.
Mm-mm.
But that terrier would be.
No.
Mm-mm.
I don't think so. They were both as docile as I wish she'd had our Rottweiler.
Yeah.
Yeah, dogs are. I was a dog handler for 3 years when I was a policeman, and best job in the world.
We have a Roddy named Dozer, and that's kind of bulldozer. He's a big old boy, and I wish she'd have had him there with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So you get to the apartment a couple of days later, and you're cleaning out the apartment. Is that when you notice the jar of pickles?
Mm-hmm. It was on the counter.
And who brought that up?
That's when the conversation came in with Jomette about why is this here or whatever. That's a little fuzzy detail-wise.
Yeah, I thought you had talked to him about it before, the lock, because you talked about the lock the day before, maybe.
That could be. That could be. It's
but then when
fuzzy.
we got there, we saw the jar of pickles and thought that must be the jar of pickles. Yeah.
Okay, that's a little fuzzy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So that's a fuzzy detail, but does he bring it up or do you bring it up?
I can't recall.
And the same with the lock, right? Now all of a sudden there's a conversation about the lock.
Mm-hmm.
When we went there, then it was like, okay, I'm physically looking at the locks like, what happened here? How did this happen? The old lock was laying on the counter. And I don't recall the prior conversations about that, but I know that we definitely talked about it then. I don't recall whether we did prior. I think we did, but maybe it was maybe surface level. I don't know.
And that's when you could physically see the lock.
That's when I actually saw
the one that had been taken off.
The one that was taken off was laying on the counter, and then I quizzed him, and I believe I quizzed him after that. But unfortunately, that's a bit of a fuzzy detail in my head.
In your mind, you're looking at a horrendous situation where you've realized that this is the area where your daughter was taken. You've got the crime scene has not been cleaned up. You're processing a tremendous amount, and you're expecting him to give you some type of logical answers. And keep me honest here, but my experience tells me that he was the last one seen with her. Mm-hmm. I mean, outside of the suspect, okay? Right. But let's just say he's the last one to talk to her. Mm-hmm. So he is a tremendous amount of information for a grieving parent. I mean, and you used the word, I was quizzing him. Okay. What was your impression?
In what regard?
Any regard.
Like, how did he respond? And
Total confusion. I know Jomette had nothing to do with it. I know that in my heart. But how could, and there's a part of me that's angry. That's like, how in the hell could this happen? Why didn't you contact me? Because I'm a fix-it man. I'm a mechanic and I fix everything around our house and all that. I would have had, like I said, I'd had door locks. I'd have had it locked down like a fortress had I known there was any beginning of an issue. But Rachel was so independent. No, don't call my dad. Jomette might have said, let's call your dad. No, don't call him. We can do this ourselves or do whatever. I don't know. I can only surmise.
So forgive me for this question.
Sure.
Did Rachel tell you about the guy standing over her, or did he tell you that Rachel said a guy was standing over her?
No, I didn't.
Who brought that conversation into the circle?
I'm trying to remember.
I don't think that. Well, I know that I didn't hear that from Rachel, because if I did, I would have locked the door down and I would have handcuffed her downstairs and said, "You're not going there."
Yeah.
I know I would have, and called me a bad guy for handcuffing
No,
her.
you're fine, Todd. I mean, you're a great dad. You're a great dad.
I don't know if you remember Carol O'Connor.
I do.
His son died, and in an interview, they asked him what he would do. He said, "I would have done anything I could have done to get myself in between him and the drugs."
Right.
Well, that's what I would have done with Rachel. I would have done anything I could do to have gotten myself in between her and that bullet. Anything. Whether that be me, whether that be a door, I would have taken the bullet. I would have done anything to have gotten in between that bullet and her. And so I don't think, again, things are a little fuzzy as far as exacts, but I don't believe I knew. In fact, I know I didn't know anything about the pickle jar until after she was dead. Exactly when, I'm not sure. I might have found out about that when we went to clean her apartment out.
Yeah.
Or it might have come out in conversation prior. I can't answer that.
I guess where I'm going here,
Sure.
In thought process, right? I mean, that we want to keep a continuum flow of thought process, because the truth is a constant. The truth does not have variances, and in these kind of cases, you don't investigate people; you investigate information.
Exactly.
Okay, and once you understand that information, then that will lead you to wherever the evidence takes you, and that will typically take you to the truth. Okay, at some point. But what I'm hearing you say tonight, and I just think it's, something I think should be discussed a little bit deeper here, is the pickle incident is introduced by one person. The lock incident is being introduced by one person. The third piece of this, obviously, is, I told her to lock the door. I told her to lock the door. Okay. And you learn about all of this stuff post-incident. Okay. And to you, that felt uncomfortable because you're saying, had I known about this, I would have fixed the problem. Okay. And so my natural instinct as, an experienced investigator is going, okay, well, is there a barrier to entry as to why you may not have known that information from the fiancé to you, the parents? I mean, because you're the critical piece of this. I mean, right? I mean, he's in love with her, and it's a great relationship. And I know you, and I'm not pointing my finger at anybody right now, right? We're just completely looking at the information that's presented here. I think I would submit to you, and you tell me how you feel. That's pretty odd that all of these pieces of the puzzle are submitted to you as the parents post-incident.
There have been many things that have been odd about this, and I suppose that's why the case hasn't been solved.
Well, and that's the reason the Cold Case Foundation exists,
Yeah.
is to ask the hard questions. And
Yeah.
also one other piece of this, which I have not shared personally with you folks, is, you know, I lost a son who was 20 years old, 21 years ago. And, you know, I know the shoes that you're wearing. I completely understand them.
Yeah.
And he was 20. I lost him September 3rd, 2003. And his 21st anniversary was just recently this month. And so there's this fog that we operate in, you know, right the time it happens, and you know, we hear these things, and then it's like, okay, all of these other conspiracy thought processes start to show up. It's like, well, why didn't I know about that? You know, why didn't I know about that? And we start to say, yeah, but that's not who I know, right? That's not him, or that's not, you know, et cetera. It must be something crazy or different or whatever. But I think offline here, I think we should talk a little bit deeper about, because I want to know a lot more about some of the idiosyncrasies, right? Some of the things that just aren't, they may make sense ultimately, right? And then the police may have already made sense of it, right? But you know, because we have two concepts going on here.
Are we online or are we offline?
No, we're online. Yeah, you're live. You're
Okay.
live. Yeah,
Okay.
and we'll talk offline, right? But there's two concepts going on here, and Gary, you know, tell me what your thought process here is. But you know, we have this subleasing. Whoops! Somebody at the door.
No, our batteries.
It just said low battery, so we were.
Okay.
Oh, I had to plug in the wrong place.
We
Okay.
see
There
the
we go.
scramble.
There we go.
That's like,
Yeah, sorry.
No, we locked ourselves
you
upstairs.
guys are amazing.
Dogs are
You're
downstairs.
amazing. And this is so hard. I am so sorry that, you know, I'm asking these questions, but my heart is in the right spot. I sincerely want to find answers for your family, for her. And of course, to bring you to settle at least some peace into, you know, a concept that nobody will understand.
You're
Right.
not offending us in any way. We've contemplated that and thought all of that over too. We don't get offended.
Okay.
So
Okay.
continue.
So we're tracking you correctly here then. Then of course, you know, then this other idea of this subleasee, you know, who has a potential key, somebody standing over her that evening. That's number 4.
The first
Right,
time.
go ahead. Right. But that was introduced to you from the boyfriend.
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. And then we have the pickles, the boyfriend.
Mhm.
Then we have the locks, the boyfriend. Right. All of these, you know, these concepts, those are huge.
Yeah.
Those are huge concepts. I mean, specifically with somebody standing over her at 3 a.m, the day before she's, you know, assassinated in her bed. Okay. I mean, that's a big deal. That's a huge deal. And then we have these peripheral challenges out here with the horse people and holding her horse, and, you know, all of this idea of, you know, who, you know, are these people involved, et cetera. And we could go down that lane for a month and a half. But one of the things that we want to always do from an investigative analysis aspect is, if you think of the letter L real fast, and you write environment, situation, circumstance, and I did it on the last show,
Yes.
and then we do low, medium, and high risk activities, okay? Everything that Rachel was doing that evening is at this end of the continuum, and it's called the victim risk continuum.
Right.
And if we circle that, that means it's a very low risk activity in your house, in your bed, at whatever time in the morning with 2 dogs. Okay, that is a very low risk circumstance. Okay, so statistically, then the math will tell us statistically there is a higher probability that the offender is known to Rachel. And it's not the other way. Okay, if we change those dynamics, just 1, 2, 3, she's out 2 or 3 in the morning downtown Phoenix, she's dancing, she's with nobody but herself, etc. And you see where that goes. At 2, 3 in the morning, she's waiting for an Uber. That means that's a high risk. That goes this way. Okay. And that would mean it would probably be a stranger or something to that effect, a victim of opportunity out into the environment. But here, we have to say, okay, who's in the circle around her? Who's in that circle? And how do we get them out of the circle? Okay, how do we get them out of the circle? And so we can talk about some of those things in person. And so, Gary, what are your thoughts? What's going on? Because I cut you off earlier, and
no, it's okay. But as you can see, we arrived at the same point about that the person seems to have known Rachel, or at least I'm not sure. I don't. This person knew her. Whether she knew him back is but I think that someone knew her and her whereabouts and things like that. But what's interesting to me is thinking of what we would call victimology, where we're really thinking about what might be the motive, etc. It's interesting to think about that. Rachel doesn't seem like somebody, with the exception of that little incident that was discussed earlier, doesn't really seem like somebody that would have many enemies. You don't really see evidence of any kind of assault or robbery or any of the traditional things that would explain something like this. And when you think about the victimology, what I can envision is that somebody would have developed, even just from your description of your daughter, what I can imagine somebody feeling toward her, and this must be in the emotions because there's no pragmatic reason why somebody would have done this, like robbery or assault of a sexual nature or anything like that. The feeling that she would evoke in someone is something like that they were an abandoned soul and she made them feel a certain way about themselves. She's a rescuer person. And what I could envision is somebody that became fixated on her or was afraid of abandonment by her or something like that, because there's something about her personality that would pull for some lost soul to kind of attach themselves to her and then be worried that that wasn't going to be sustained in some way. And obviously that's just a feeling, but there's nothing much else in the victimology that makes any sense. It must be that somebody was drawn to her light and her goodness and became kind of fixated. I have to have this person in my life in some way. And it's interesting, Chris, to think about that. Do you have that same impression that this is somebody who seems to have honed in on her as this kind of life force and had that terrible feeling of, you're not going to be here forever, that kind of thing? Because that's the impression that I get. There's no other motive that even can be hinted at. Somebody obsessed, somebody who had been abandoned, something like that. What other motive is there? There's no fight. There's no,
Yeah, I think there's an insecurity issue,
right,
with the suspect. Am I right, Gary?
Yeah.
There's a heavy insecurity issue with the suspect. There's a control issue. But the night before is a very interesting idea about why let's and by the way, we don't know, right?
No. Just based on our experience and intuition.
Right. We're just saying
Right.
we don't want the world going after anybody, in terms of, that's the guy. Nobody knows, right? But if we just use common investigative techniques, the randomness of a suspect the night before coming in, standing over her, what's that all about? Are they processing, okay, I don't have enough courage tonight to shoot her, but tomorrow night I will, and he comes back?
Or is it unrelated?
Well, yeah, but the randomness of that.
Was that part of the prior tenants? And it's like, like you mentioned, the pickles were part of a drug situation. Well, was that a mistaken situation that came in and absolutely has nothing to do with any of it?
Well, drugs can introduce a motivelessness into a situation, and that is definitely something that anybody looking at this is going to have to keep on the table. Because, Chris, it is true that this could be a totally disorganized situation where a person is high and comes in and just does this bizarre motiveless thing. But that is quite rare, actually, and there would have been signs of more awful things that would happen when somebody is high and just kind of doing things chaotically, and probably would have left a lot more traces and so forth. I suspect that there is a motive here, and that the motive is not any of the traditional ones. I also don't think, based on what I'm hearing, that this was some sort of hired gun, kind of situation, because a person like that would have made it look like something else. They would have staged a robbery, a break-in, whatever. It looks more like something that had something to do with a dynamic that somebody had with her. And based on her personality and victimology, it isn't that she was an awful person. It was that somebody saw the goodness of her and was locked in on her in some way. Now, let's say this was some kind of serial offender or a person who, there are offenders that go in and look at a person sleeping and case the place and whatever, but they would have done things that didn't happen here. That they wouldn't just take a gun and do this. Wouldn't you agree, Chris? This looks more like an intimate, this person knows her. They were an insecure person that targeted her when she was asleep purposely because that they knew what kind of person she was. Now, there's one part that is very puzzling about this story. There are many parts, but one part that's truly puzzling is that, let's say this was somebody very intimately known to her. Well, why didn't she say that on the phone call to the dispatcher? She said somebody broke in, and broke in, not somebody I know who's been in here before, somebody who's I know intimately. She said somebody, meaning that the person was either disguised, wearing a mask and covered in black or something like that, or she had no idea who this person was. It was a total stranger. Now, let's say it was a total stranger. Why would a total stranger break in and look at you in your sleep and then come in and shoot you with no other motivation? Well, the only thing I could think of is that they were somebody who had an obsession with you, who developed a fixation on you, a stalker or something like that. But there would be signs of that, I think what, Chris, wouldn't you say? I mean, there would be somebody that had sloppily popped up here and there. You're walking this way and I'm walking the same way, whatever. And the boyfriend would have heard stories like that. There's this creepy guy that's obsessed with me. Somebody keeps calling and breathing and hanging up. I think I saw somebody at the window. In other words, I don't know about that story. I feel like this is not a stranger who came in. Chris, do you have that same impression? It doesn't match the typical stories of a stranger from the outside that comes in with no motive other than to eliminate you and right? So we agree this is somebody who at least knew her in passing. Knew her.
They have cross paths.
They have cross paths. So I think we can definitely, and I think that, and given that other than that incident you described, there doesn't seem to be any reason she'd have an enemy in the world. I mean, she was the kind of person who made the world a better place. So it makes more sense.
It sounds like it. Yeah. This whoever this person is,
right?
Number one, the pickle jar is just a random,
like a red herring or something.
Yeah, it's an irrelevant piece of evidence. I mean, it's like, why is there a pickle jar here? Okay. I mean, and then even more important than that is, why is it even a discussion point with the family? Oh, by the way, I need to tell you about the pickle jar. Okay. Well, why? That's kind of like,
I believe, I'm nearly certain that came out when we went there to clean out
and that's even worse.
Oh, this is what that was all about. I think I
feel like it was more that we knew that there had been somebody. I'm that time is very foggy for me as well, but I feel like on Friday morning, Rachel, in a phone call, because I don't have it in a text, told me somebody was in my apartment last night.
And that may be.
And I think I said something like, oh my gosh, that's really scary. Why didn't you call the police? And I feel like she just said, well, it was probably somebody that thought the people that lived here before, her name was America, probably thought it was America, because she was a small, long, dark hair, partially Hispanic looking girl as well. So Rachel just didn't seem that concerned about it. She just felt more like, well, they just probably didn't realize America had moved out yet, and we changed the lock, so everything's fine. I really feel that we had that conversation. It's kind of coming back to me a little bit, but it was just on the phone. And I just remember thinking, why wouldn't you call the police? But then that was Rachel. And so I guess I didn't think that much of it. Also, I'm in Indiana with grandkids and busy with that. They were 4 and 6 at the time. And when she said they changed the lock, well, then it was taken care of, so everything would be fine. And so we knew about the lock situation, but I don't think we knew anything about the pickles until we went to the apartment and it was on the counter, and I saw it and I was like, what is this? And I think Joe Matt just randomly said, oh, the person that came in that night left these on the counter. So
Okay, well, and that's a really good point. So let's say she tells you about the pickles arbitrarily, right? She says, oh, it must have belonged to the gal that was here before. Okay. Couple of things I'd want to know. Why'd she leave them? And then the next night they have dinner, they watch a movie, and there's a pickle jar on the counter that from the night before potentially could have belonged to the other person. And then a couple days later, he comes in and goes, oh yeah, that pickle jar was there because of blah, blah, blah. Okay. I mean, is Rachel sounds like a dominant personality.
Yes.
All right. And I think that pickle jar would have probably driven her crazy. It's sitting there, they're having dinner around the pickle jar. They're going to the pool around the pickle jar. They're coming home around the pickle jar. He's locking the doors around the pickle jar, and the pickle jar is still there.
Well,
okay.
Let's say I think that there is some discrepancy and fogginess in the memory on
Not a problem.
that, because there's part of my memory that remembers it being in the refrigerator.
I put it in the refrigerator.
Okay.
The day
so you moved it. You see how that's an important piece here.
It was on the counter when we walked in, and I don't know. I think I picked it up and set it in the refrigerator.
Being a mom.
Yeah. And just not even in my right mind, I guess. I don't even know.
Then that may have been when we learned about it, or it could have been prior. I think there's some fuzziness in the
not a problem. Not a problem. It's always the smallest problems that create the largest windows.
But also your point about when they were in the apartment together and they did have dinner and then they went swimming and all of those things, the jar of pickles was on the counter, knowing the intruder from the night before had brought it.
which is very
Yeah,
odd.
how did that
Left
happen?
by the people.
Great point. That is a wonderful point. How did he know?
Well,
How did he know that the intruder left the pickle jar?
because it wasn't there before.
So it's an assumption that he made that the intruder brought a pickle jar with him to stand over your daughter's bed. I'll bring in the pickle, and I'm going to watch Rachel.
I feel like the way she told me was this person came in, she woke up, he was looking down at her, and she felt like the person realized it wasn't who he thought it was and left. And I feel like she even mentioned, yeah, and he left a jar of pickles on the counter. Like it wasn't a big deal. Like your opioid explanation would mean more, maybe.
Yeah.
Like
in retrospect now, Kim, looking back,
mm-hmm.
right? In retrospect now, right? Because at that time, you guys are in just overload,
Yeah.
right? I mean, everything, is right, because I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
But now in retrospect, you're looking back and you're going, well, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This pickle thing just seems, we used to call that DLR, does not look right. Okay. It's a random situation where, if what's the motive of the suspect coming in there looking for the other woman, right? I'm just going to say it. It's SA, right? It's right. An assault situation. Typically, 90% of the time, if you're going to get up at 2:00 in the morning and break into somebody's house, or at least open the door and go into somebody's house that you have a key to, number one. So that means you have knowledge of who potentially could be in that place. And number two, you're going to stand over their bed at 2 a.m. and then go, oh, that's not her. Okay. So I'll just leave my pickles and I'm out of here. Okay. That, right? It doesn't make sense, does it? No. So there's a high probability that story could be fabricated. Now, not the pickles. The pickles is relevant because they're there. Okay. But the other side of that coin is, does Rachel like pickles? According to the family tradition, do you guys eat pickles?
But not that type of pickle.
Not that type, but maybe she wanted to try them hypothetically. Right?
And it was more as a family, like when we would leave from going camping, it was a tradition. We'd open up a jar of pickles.
There you go.
Okay.
Now, not saying that they're her pickles either.
Size round pickles.
Did the police did not recover those, that they did not take those pickles?
The police had done all of their investigation before we went to the apartment to clean it out. So if they took DNA from the jar of pickles,
I hope so.
If
they took DNA, they should have taken the jar. They would have taken the jar and put it in evidence.
Because it was there on the counter.
Okay. So and there's probably that they're gone. The pickles are gone. Somebody threw them away when they cleaned out that apartment. I'm sure of it. And that's okay. That's okay because, it still gives us insight into, somebody knew about them. You saw them. Mm-hmm. So that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing that, you can physically testify to hypothetically. And if you ever had to, yeah, I saw those pickles. In fact, I put them in the fridge and then later I threw them away. Okay. That's not a bad thing. Okay. But the story, and that's why I wanted to stay at that night for a moment. The pickle story, to me, it sounds like, I'm not really sure about that, but I don't know. I could be wrong 1,000%. I mean, there may be another explanation to this that, we're just not hearing just yet, but now then we fast forward, less than 24 hours, and the pickle person shows back up hypothetically. And only this time they have a gun. That doesn't make sense.
Why not the first night?
Right. And if you're going to take the risk, remember, there's also on the other side of that, there's what they call a suspectology. The suspect wants to lower their risk.
Quick in and out.
They want to lower it, right? They're going to do everything in their, if you're going to go into an apartment and just, what Gary was talking and we were talking earlier, if this was a serial offender, okay,
Right.
a serial offender is going to lower the risk as much as possible. Okay, they're not going to increase their risk. Oh, I'm back a second night. Okay, because what would happen if they missed? Right. Well, now they're up here, and your daughter, who's a type A dominant, is going to go, yeah, it was that guy. Okay. The fact that she didn't see him tells me she was probably sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And she was startled awake. Well, by then the suspect's already fired, and he's already turning and running.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a security. Go ahead, Gary.
That's your explanation, I would imagine, for why she's just said somebody broke in, but it could potentially be someone she knew intimately.
Absolutely.
So you think that she shot, and then by the time she turns around, the person's gone. So she's simply saying, as we all would, clearly somebody broke in and did this to me. But if she knew the person, she wouldn't have said
she may not have known the person.
Right.
Right. I mean, I think she told the truth. Somebody came in and shot me.
Well, she said broke in, which is an interesting.
Well, was the door broken? No. So the question then, and who introduces the narrative? Then the narrative is, I went back and told her twice, lock the door. Okay. That's an interesting piece of the puzzle too.
Yeah.
Okay. This narrative of, hey, go back and lock the door. I told her twice, lock the door. Well, how do you know she didn't do it the first time? Well, I waited. Okay. And then you went back in. Was she sleeping at that moment that she was so tired she wouldn't get up and come and lock the door? Okay. And there's a correlation there in relationship to the lock mechanism. Okay, we have to have a conversation about the lock mechanism, because the introduction to that principle is, this is obsolete information. I mean, it's just random information. There was a case in Colorado recently where the husband was arrested he hasn't been arrested yet. He was the first time, but then the guy's name is Barry Morphew. And immediately he gets out of his truck and he says, was it a mountain lion? That, his wife had gone on a bike ride and they found the bike. And immediately he starts introducing all of these possibilities of what it could be. Okay. And then, it just got better and better and better and better and better. And then they find him on video, dropping off all kinds of items of evidence, in various dumpsters around, Colorado. Okay. And so randomness in terms of conversation, post-conversation is like really important information, because, you have to say, okay, well, why is this happening? Why am I hearing this? Why am I hearing about a jar of pickles?
But Chris, your point about the lock, I think, is central to the whole matter. And, as Sherlock Holmes, famously said, when you've eliminated the impossible, no matter what remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. And we're left in a position where there's only one of two possibilities. The door was never locked when she went to bed, or the person had a key.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't think of any other way to get around it, right? So, and let's look at it like this. We have to put ourselves, and what I like to do is imagine myself into the shoes of the victim and the perpetrator. Your daughter was a very intelligent woman, was she not?
Mm-hmm. She was.
Self-protective and smart.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense she would leave the door unlocked?
No.
After the incident of somebody staring at her in bed? Well, then aren't we left with the likelihood that whoever did this had the key and we know about, look, you mentioned something about this lock being
Well,
installed.
we don't know if there's a key, Gary, to your point.
Well, maybe there was no key at all, right? But that is going to be, I think, central to this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that I can't figure out, because there's no other way the person would have gotten in. So they either knew someone who had the key, or they had the key, or the door was never locked. It's one of those three, Chris. I mean, what don't you think? I mean, they didn't come in a window. They didn't come in. So, because the door isn't busted down, right?
Right.
Nobody fiddled with it. It's not broken. The police would have found that immediately.
Right.
That places into the circle very few people. I mean, it really does feel more and more that whoever is responsible for this is like under your own nose. Like they're like this is a small circle of people who knew her. Chris, I would say that this person knew her so well that they might have even injected themselves into the family. The family may know them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the thing. I mean, Chris, do you have that feeling too?
At this point, I want to
Keep it agnostic.
concept. Yeah, I
Right.
think what I want to do, and if it's okay with you and Todd and Kim, I want to come down there and I want to meet you. I want to see the apartment. Right. I want to see. I'd like to talk to folks if possible, and also I want to see these puppies and her. I want to see. I want to get. I had a case years ago where, and I don't know if you saw Buddy, my Jack Russell. He's an absolute nut job. He's over here on the floor sleeping. He had to be near Dad during this whole thing. You guys know the drill. But I had a caper years ago where we were, Greg Cooper and I were in Louisiana. And long story short, they had a 15-year-old or the case was like 15 or 20 years old and gone cold. And the cops early on, the PD was putting a lot of pressure on the brother. And they owned a donut shop. The sister was the victim. And she was killed in this donut shop. And they put a lot of pressure on the brother in this whole thing. And eventually he lawyered up. He said, no, I'm not talking to you, et cetera, et cetera. And so this cold case investigator got this case, and Greg and I were there, and we reviewed the case with him. And he says to us, he turns and he goes, okay, well, you've seen it, so what would you guys do? And Greg looks at me and he says, what comes to your mind? And I said, make donuts. Exactly. And he chuckled like that and he says, what? And I said, go make donuts. He goes, okay, let me in, help me understand. I said, think about it. Your sister was killed at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning making donuts in the donut shop. The PD thought that the brother did it, and they put so much pressure on him that he lawyered up, and there's no way, okay, that he's going to talk. So just approach him and say, look, I'm not here to talk to you about anything in the case. I just want to feel what your sister felt at 3 in the morning making donuts. And long story short, fast forward, he spent about a week learning how to make donuts with the brother. And after about a week, the brother turned to him and he says, you're really not here for me, are you? He goes, no, sir. He says, I am only here to learn what your sister saw, felt, and was going through before her life was taken. And out of the blue, the brother turns to him and goes, all right, I want to tell you about a kid that used to hang outside, and we caught him cutting our phone lines. He goes, bingo. Okay. And that was just kind of off the wall. And Greg and I looked at each other, and then, we started doing some other things. Long story short, that was just making donuts. And in a situation like this, where everybody was fixated on, well, there's nothing here, there's nothing here. Law enforcement gets into this. Sometimes they get into these veins where they know everything, they are everything. We're not going to release any information because it may jeopardize, the investigation, yada, yada. When sometimes you just have to, push a little bit further into the public, okay, like, the silent witness program that you guys have going here. Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, and I know Gilbert PD is doing an amazing job, and they're working with you guys, but they're not going to tell you everything, and they can't. You guys know that more than
Right.
anybody. Okay? They're going to hold back. We call that hold back, right? You hold back some information. You don't put it all out there. But at the same time, your daughter's case is sitting on a shelf somewhere with her name all over it in these binders. Okay. And there's 4 more underneath her.
Yeah.
Okay. From the investigators. Okay. So this is one of the reasons we're grateful that you trust us here to get this information out. And then simultaneously, I really believe this case is solvable.
I do, Chris.
You agree, Gary?
Yes, because I think the circle of potential people is not very large. This is not a situation where you're saying, it's likely that some total stranger with no clear motive who just came out of nowhere and did this for no reason. I think you're dealing with they can work through a circle until they figure out.
Yeah.
That's my sense. I impression, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's always a possibility that it could be a mistaken identity. However,
right.
Okay, that the identity was known the night before, and then to come back the second night and say, "Oh, it's a different person tonight," or it's the same person the night before. So, that those are the kind of rabbit holes that we could chase for days.
Yeah.
Investigators chase these things for days. And the reason they do that is there are 2 principles. The first principle is they ask, how did this happen? And investigators that ask that question, how did this happen, will spend an enormous amount of time on useless trivia. Information that has no relevance. But if they shift that point for just a second and ask why did this happen?
Mhm.
Okay. Why is there a jar of pickles on the counter? Why are the locks being changed? Why did the person come before the night before? Why did the person get away the way they got away? Why are there no leads? You see the difference here?
Yeah.
Because when you start asking all of these whys, then the hows and the whos start presenting themselves.
Right.
And we teach that in what they call the 10 filters of profiling through a criminal behavior analysis aspect. And you rip a piece of paper off and you put it on the board and you ask all these stupid things. And then you have investigators just randomly throw stuff literally at the board, right? The old like college, just start throwing stuff, even if it's relevant or not. Those pickles, as crazy as that sounds, are huge.
Mm-hmm.
It is a jar of pickles in the living room. It's like the elephant in the living room. And so we ask ourselves, okay, well, why are they there? And then how did they get there? I.e., who introduced it?
Yeah.
What was the conversation? And then you can start, pulling strings from there.
Well,
And
Chris,
go ahead.
I agree with you because it all you're left with is one of 2 possibilities: somebody who introduced randomness because of a chaos, or somebody who was giving the impression of randomness to throw people off a track. It's one or the other. I mean, what else could it be? I mean, it's so random that it smacks of a made-up story because, like we're trying to, but of course it's impossible to say because it could be completely random. But so, that I think that's where your mind has to kind of be, like between those two possibilities. But I think the evidence so far, pure speculation, but the evidence is suggestive of someone who has had interaction before.
Gary, wouldn't you agree, though, Gary, that they're not random because you have Rachel and her girlfriend hauling this mattress up 3 floors, okay, and dropping it in this apartment, and Rachel being the cowgirl that she is and the tiger that she is, going, what she'd be the first one to say, what the heck is a jar of pickles doing here? Okay.
Right.
That would be out of her character not to notice it. Okay.
Definitely noticed it.
Right. And then all of a sudden, that night, okay, everybody's, there's some guy that shows up at 3 a.m. to peek over her and watch her. And this guy decides, let's just play devil's advocate. I'm the suspect. You know what? I'm going to go break into her apartment because I've got a key. Okay. Wait a minute. I'm going to take my pickles. Okay.
It's bizarre.
Because I have an opioid problem, right? I'm going to have my pickles.
Bizarre. I agree with you. Bizarre. Absolutely.
I'm going to use my key to get in. Okay. Where is she? Well, okay. It's the girl that used to live there. Okay. But before I go in and stand over her bed, I'm going to put my pickles on the counter. Okay. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to stand over her. And she's going to wake up and go, hey, who the heck are you? And I'm going to run and leave my pickles.
Any DNA on that pickle jar?
Well, they're gone. Great question. They're gone.
They did submit DNA, but they won't tell us what it was on.
Perfect.
That's great.
I am going to pray so hard now that comes back to hopefully the pickle. I don't know if they took it from the pickle jar, they should have taken the jar. But so I'm not going to say. They may have it in other places. Let's keep our fingers crossed that the window will be open.
Was the firearm identified?
Well,
or is that public knowledge? We don't know.
Not at all.
Because of course, ballistics, Chris, could go a long way with if they can identify the particular firearm used. Who in the circle.
They're going to hold that back. They're not going to even tell the firearm.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that isn't right. But Chris, it's interesting because and you can tell me your own experience, but when in my sense of situations where there is an intimate that is killed, when it is because of some kind of emotional thing, it tends to explode and happen in a much more impromptu kind of way, and it's kind of sloppy, and there tends to be regret afterwards in the individual and all that. Where you tend to see something like tidying things up and the cover story and the whole thing is when the motive is what I actually have called myself in the literature elimination murder, which is where a person has a very specific reason to have an issue with somebody because the person is an impediment to something that they're trying to get, or the individual is trying to take something away from them, something that they want or need. And so there's a kind of plotting and scheming to eliminate the individual, and then a cover story is used to put a story over it. Now, the thing is, I think that I want to be clear that no aspersions can be cast based on this conversation, right? Because it is also possible that someone who knows an intimate in this situation could have some involvement in this situation. Right. So I think, Chris, you'd agree, we have to be very cautious about over-interpretation. But I think the clues are pointing to someone who knew her and someone who had some kind of personal dynamic with her that was problematic for them. And given the victimology, it seems to have more to do with how good she was, not how bad she was, right? That it's suggestive of someone who's afraid of, you made me feel special and now you're abandoning me, or you make everyone else feel special and you don't pay any attention to me, or there's some emotional thing I want from you and I'm obsessed with you, something like that. It's not, you're a terrible person and I've got to get rid of you. I mean, there's nothing in the victimology that is suggestive of that. It all points to someone who was so kind that they might have literally left the door open and emotionally left the door open to people that may have been wolves in sheep's clothing, or not who they said they were, or taken advantage or something like that. I think it's whatever comes out of this story, my gut tells me that it's going to be a kind of a lesson in how kindness can sometimes let things in that you don't intend, and lead to terrible things. Chris, don't you have that impression too?
Yeah, I think the again, if we stay with the information and not the people, the information is telling us right now, the investigative information that's telling us, and just randomly meeting this great family for the first time.
Yeah, they're amazing.
That this is somebody within the circle. Somebody had access, obviously, to that apartment. Mm-hmm. Rachel probably knew this person, or this was not just a total random situation that just appears. Now, the only dynamic that could change that information flow would be the previous tenant in relationship to, who had access point, et cetera. Okay. But once the lock was changed, hey, the randomness of that now becomes, maybe out of play, because the only thing then that we can shift to in our thought process would be that the victim herself forgot to lock the door that evening. Okay. Yet she is the type of person that doesn't sound like that's her type of personality. She sounds like she gets it done. She looks for the minutia, and that was probably because, she was an overachiever, and she wanted, she's wrestling on the boys' wrestling team. She's playing football. Okay, this is a girl that is very aware of her surroundings, her circumstances. She's goal-oriented. She has a gift. She has many gifts, not only with animals, but I don't see her being too trusting of people.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, Chris.
And that's why you am I right, Mom and Dad?
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And that's why the animals are so important in her life, because she loves animals, because
they're predictable.
They're predictable.
I always love you.
And that obviously goes back to her childhood, from the things that you folks brought her through and, made her believe in herself and the woman that she is. And by the way, I will always listen to you talk about Rachel. I will guarantee you, if you guys say, hey, Chris, Karen, my sweetheart, hey, can we just talk about? Absolutely. We're here 24/7. I'm really good at throwing rocks at 3 a.m. And by the way, when this is all over at some point, hopefully we're high-fiving each other and we'll become, really good friends.
Yeah.
But this is how I'm interpreting. If this was my case and this was my first day on the case, which it is, second time actually that I'm starting to learn about it. But now that I'm meeting you, okay, I'm starting to sense Rachel.
Right.
And right, Gary? And I'm going, okay, wait a minute. This is the second night in that house, and the first night she had some person standing over her. Why the second night she would forget to lock the door?
And why won't she tell you? Why wouldn't she tell you?
Well, right. And the whole purpose of changing the locks I mean, that would be the first thing in her head would be, okay, good night, click. Okay.
I've been 2.5 years. I don't sleep at night. I wake up with nightmares
Trying to figure
because of that one thing.
Yep.
Why
Mm-hmm.
the door?
Yeah, and exactly, Todd. And you see, that doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
It doesn't make sense. And so typically when something doesn't make sense, right, we have to get to that place where we rewind that information, and we say to ourselves, okay, well, why does it not make sense? And then that's where you ask the question, how did this information get into the conversation? Where did it come from? Because the victim, if we look at the victimology in here, what Dr. Gary and I were talking about, the victimology in this whole scenario is this a very organized, structured, she's willing to drive, fearless gal. I mean, driving to Montana in the middle of the night, with a dually with 50 feet behind you and horses and all the stuff that you explained. And then all of a sudden you get to these minutia details, a jar of pickles. She forgot to lock the door. All these other things, it doesn't make sense. Right. And so that's what we call DLR. Does not look right. Right. Okay. Doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
And that's where Sherlock Holmes, right? Like Dr. Gary was talking about the probabilities. Is it possible? Anything's possible.
Right.
You always leave that on the table, right? There's always this, you left it on the table, but your hearts are telling you one thing, but your ears are explaining to you something different. I always used to tell families, and I still continue to do so, follow your heart. A mom's instinct is right on target 90% of the time, 99.9% of the time. I mean, I'll be with my wife and she'll go, that guy's weird. I'll go, no, he's a nice guy. He's great. She goes, no, he's weird. Trust me. And I'm like, okay. And lo and behold, she's right for me being wrong.
Boy, I hope she likes me, Chris.
Oh, yeah, you're right. So
I'm in a lot of trouble.
Okay, so I've had you for 2 hours. That's a long time. So, and we'll do more of this. Okay, we're going to do more of this. But I have a tradition. I have a tradition here. If it's okay with you guys, I'm gonna. You, mom and dad, I'm gonna put this up here. Okay, and then Gary and I are gonna step off the screen, and then you, Todd and Kim, if you would, wherever your heart wants to take you, just talk to the world. There's, almost 2,000 people here now. Okay. And feel free to say whatever you want to say. And then don't leave though, after you're done. Cause after everything is done, we'll talk to you, after we're off the air, if that's okay with you. So I'm going to give you the last word, and,
Okay.
You
Chris,
say
are we
whatever.
going to say anything just
Go ahead,
before
Gary.
we sort of step away, or are we going to just go off screen? Because
No, if you, what are your thoughts?
well,
Gary?
I think I just want to say that, first of all, one of the things I love about these opportunities to meet the families is because it gives the world an opportunity to see that underneath a word like crime or murder, so forth, is a human being with a beating heart, and that is loved and missed. And listening to this story really brought her to life and brought you to life, and so that's very, very powerful. And I want to say that I'm very heartened listening to the two of you, because there's such a goodness that explodes out of the screen listening to the two of you. I mean, people that understand just by a kind of their nature are living and breathing constant acts of mercy, I mean, in the world, and giving and saving and rescuing people and so forth. And, like Shakespeare said, so shines a good deed in a weary world. It does very, very, very good thing for the hearts of a lot of cynical people to know there are people out there that are like you. And it is beautiful to think that from the age of 6 until her untimely passing, that 13 to 14 years, because it was nearly her birthday, I think,
Yes.
you filled it with a goodness that really, made life beautiful for her.
Yeah.
I hope that it gives you some peace to know that if you hadn't come into the world and done that, we don't know what would have happened to her. So just know that in that brevity of life, you filled it with so much love and goodness that it's extraordinary. And I can tell it just by listening to you for 2 seconds. And that's such a beautiful thing. I mean, Chris, I think you can see it too. I mean, the whole audience sees it. They've been saying it for all this time. How heartening that is. Because the fact is, children coming into the world, it's like a crapshoot. I deal with people that happen to be born to parents where the biggest problem they have is what flavor salad is the noodle salad they're going to have at the picnic. And some people's biggest problem is, my mother literally put me out with the garbage. My father beats me all day long and, tortures me, so forth. So, the idea that you came along and you rescued her has to give you consolation. I couldn't let you go without saying that to you.
Thank
And I
you.
want you to know that I'm here for you in any way. If you ever want to talk, even just to, I don't know, keep Rachel alive. By
And
talking
he's the pro.
about it.
He's the pro. So we'll exchange numbers behind the scenes after this. So
I'll be here for you. And I, it's impossible not to feel your pain, and I'm here for you. So we'll exchange information, and in the meantime,
Great.
I'll keep Rachel in my prayers. But I'm telling you, this is going to get solved. Everything in my instinct tells me,
Yeah.
I have closure on this, and I think then there's going to be the next phase of pain and healing and all that.
Right.
But it'll happen. Trust me.
Yeah.
All right, Chris.
okay, Dr. Gary, that's why we love him. He's an amazing human being. Okay, I'm going to pull him out here for a second, and then okay, so Todd and Kim, at the end of your whatever you're feeling, then we have a tradition. I go to Hawaii, so kind of bring everybody back to, feeling a little bit better. But this is your time, and please don't hang up. So, like I said, in a moment at the conclusion, we'll talk to you a little bit more. But thank you again for being here and sharing Rachel's story. So we're going to give you the time.
Let me just tell one story, if I may. One of the things that we love to do, we love to go camping, and we love to go to the lake. Rachel loved to go to the lake, loved boating. Canyon Lake, it's about an hour away from our house, and we used to love going there. And we hadn't made it in a year and a half or something like that. Life had been a little crazy. I got COVID and got into long COVID and been feeling real weird on all that. We hadn't made it for a while, and Rachel asked me, Dad, can we go to the lake for my birthday, which was June 12th. And she asked me maybe in April or March or April even. I mean, just way ahead of time. And I remember her telling me, because like the last year there was something wrong with the boat and didn't get it ready to go, and said, I'm giving you a warning, ahead of time or whatever. She might have been January, who knows. But she specifically asked me if we could go to the lake for her birthday. And I was planning on it, and I got the boat ready, and there was something that needed to be fixed. I don't remember what, but I got it ready, and I was so ready to go. And instead of going to the lake, we married her that day. And that's a promise that I made that I didn't get to fulfill to my daughter. And it breaks my heart. I do my best to fulfill promises. That's one of the harder things that happens every year. But there's also something Rachel got her dad to do something he'd never done. I always was against tattoos, not on anybody else. It's up to you. It doesn't matter to me, but against it on my body, I just said, no, I'll never do that. Let's see if I can get that. And I finally did that. And those of you who can do Roman numerals, that's 6/4/2022. That was the day I lost my little girl.
So I guess I would just say thank you to everybody that watches and has thoughts and ideas and can contribute in any way to helping us get answers and bring justice for Rachel. And we just appreciate everything that everybody's doing
Thank you.
to help.
Someone, somewhere, somehow knows something.
We're just hoping and praying that somebody talks, somebody shares, somebody speaks something that will lead to answers and to justice. So thank you to everybody for listening and for helping and for knowing Rachel.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We'll